Andy was kind enough to invite me to come to Amazon's conference where they were holding a startup competition. And so we talked a little bit about what was Amazon trying to do. And as you heard, there was a key thought that Andy had, which was to establish a developer community and to develop some great showcase applications that would really bring to life what was possible in the cloud. And so he asked me to come and give a presentation at that event, which I duly did very briefly to sort of preface this. And we called this cloud hatching. And the idea of cloud hatching is very simple, and that is that if you could start today with the assumption that everything is available in the cloud, you'd start very differently. And I know this for a fact personally as an investor, because I've got Wayne here from Demandware, who when we started our e-commerce business back in 2002, there was no AWS. So we didn't have the luxury of thinking about this. But by contrast, when another of my investments, Acquia, Bryan was sitting in our office, when we were incubating that, we assumed that the cloud was going to be there. And in fact, we wrote an entire business model around the idea of the cloud. So two extreme examples there. But this is a world that's moved on. And so just to give you this as a background, we think about this as an opportunity for startups. We think that you can cloud hatch your business very differently today, knowing this. And in particular, as Andy said, you can innovate in a way that was never possible before. You can afford to spin up 1,000 instances of something and try it. And if it doesn't work, just shut it all down and then move on to the next one. So that whole notion of prototyping at this early stage, really in a way free, is just so exciting. But on the other hand, we also think it's incredibly important that you do that with a clear understanding of one of the principles we talk about in the business model area, which is innovating around your core. So again, Andy highlighted this beautifully, which is that what really Amazon was doing was they were taking away all that undifferentiated heavy lifting. In fact, when I first heard about Amazon was, I think Bezos came to talk at MIT, funny enough. And Jeff Barr was there afterwards, and I went like beeline up to him and said, "Is this real?" Because I just didn't believe it. It was like, this is like the VC's dream. We waste all this money over and over again at every single startup. So one of the things I really encourage you to do is to think about cloud hatching where you do absolutely the bare minimum. So we're not talking about the minimum viable product now. We're talking about the minimum viable differentiation. And what I mean by that is everything in that product that is undifferentiated, put it in the cloud. Use somebody else's core competency to build around, because that's going to give you the highest possible value for your startup. So MVP is great, but look for minimum viable differentiation and get that right to the core. And I see you nodding, but I hope that's a key part of what we're going to talk about today. The second thing that I would encourage people to do, therefore, is to look outside at what's possible. I mean, again, when we started in many of these companies 10 years ago, there was no such thing as an ecosystem. I call it a weather system to keep with the cloud theme, with tens of thousands of open APIs that you could build on. But these are readily available. There are cloud services today that do everything, not from just storage and compute, but price comparison if you're in e-commerce, or at the other extreme, data validation. Heck, you could even get cloud services like the Amazon Turk to do, obviously, access to crowdsourcing. So it's just extraordinarily different today. And again, as a startup, think about how you can leverage these kinds of things to build your business, to hatch your business in the cloud differently. Now, this is not something that also is just about the startup. I mean, you heard Andy sharing some of his experiences about he took Amazon as a business from inception. I have a very simple framework that we often talk about in the go-to-market piece, the see, try, buy, fly, die model, which is really the lifecycle model. And if you look at any business model, what really comes to the fore is it really works if you manage to extend this life cycle, if you make the life cycle actually repeat so you can both upsell and get a long life cycle value from your customer. That's when your model really starts to work. Now, why does the cloud change that? Well, think about this for a second. In the old model, we had to go and sell every single upgrade. No, never mind upgrade, every update. If there was a security patch, we had to figure out how to get that shipped to a customer and out there and in their hands. I mean, in my experience with Symantec, for example, when we were getting the virus business going, we literally physically had to ship disks out to people when new viruses came out. I mean, that just seems so insane. But imagine if the cloud had been there and we could have done what we now do, obviously, which is just make this a service. Just subscribe to it. You can make it so much easier for the innovation to come forward and for the adoption of that to be painless and effectively reduce all of the friction in this, and therefore extend the customer lifecycle with increased value at a higher rate of innovation. This is just a new world, and it's enabled by the cloud. And I'd go one step further, and I would say that it's actually helping you reach a very different set of marketplaces. Andy gave a great example of this. You can go global from day one. That is just game changing. It means you don't have to think about your segment, your minimum viable segment, as being geographically bounded. You can now think about it as a particular segment across the globe if you want to, so long as they all have that same set of needs. So it's a very different world to think about. And what I constantly see, because I've been evangelizing cloud since, frankly, I first heard the early innings of it, is that very few startups really stop and think about how to reinvent from the core what it is they do in every part of their life cycle, from the innovation all the way through to the go-to-market. What I hope we'll see, and I'm now evangelizing a little bit of vision here, is that actually people create a trifecta of things. They look at how to cloud hatch their business, but they also look at how to create a disruptive cloud-enabled business model, something that would not be possible without the cloud. So these kinds of subscription and renewal-based models that obviously enable very disruptive things. And frankly, it's a public company, so I can't say much about it, except we announced results yesterday at Demandware. And record-breaking quarter. That was a business model disruption more than anything else. It was charging on a per customer GMV basis in a shared value model. That would not have been possible without the cloud. I mean, we were able to do that, as hopefully Wayne will give you some sense about it. And then, as I said, go after unreachable markets that you wouldn't have been able to get to had you not had this innovation. Because instantly at that point, you're advantaged to anybody else who isn't taking advantage of this. And you're putting yourself in a position to be a winner. So with that said, we think the future is very bright. As I mentioned, we're running this survey. You have the link to it here. We'd love you to all contribute to it. But what we heard last year, in the second year, was that every software category, for example, is going to be disrupted by cloud. There wasn't one that didn't come back with at least 50% of people saying it's going to get disrupted, whether it was big data or it was CRM or it was HR. So it's a phenomenal opportunity. And we think the combination of these various different clouds is actually going to be where the real opportunity is. So for example, it's not just media and entertainment and social and collaboration, but if you think about all of these things, imagine the day when and frankly it's really here, so I don't even have to say imagine, these cloud services are all reaching you today via your mobile device. It would be useless without the cloud services. But the fact that it's tracking you, it knows who your friends are, and it can enable you to do payments means that if you're out literally with a group of people and you want the best recommendation from your friends about what you should go and see, you can get that instantly. And then you can decide where is the closest place. And you can instantly then transact and buy a ticket and go there. And then that data can be kept on you to make the recommendation about what the next thing you go and see is. Every one of those things I just talked about is an example of a cloud service that's being enabled by this next wave. And the combination of them is unlocking some fantastic potential here. So with that, let me welcome 4 great entrepreneurs who are doing exactly this. I'd like to have each of you just briefly introduce your company and then have a chance to talk to Andy about what you're doing here.
Hi, everybody. My name is Bryan. I am the co-founder of ZeroVFX and ZYNC. ZeroVFX specializes in visual effects for feature films and TV commercials. Started in 2010, and we decided to cloud hatch. Because that was of necessity. We wanted a scalable organization that could work with the ebbs and flows of the project lifecycle that we have. So with that, we worked with Amazon, launched in 2010 using that, and then decided to productize that just last year to ZYNC.
So great. Wayne Whitcomb, CTO of Demandware, part of the founding team for the company. Basically, we got started about 10 years ago. Michael, one of our key supporters to do that. Certainly when we started, there were no options related to AWS and some of the facilities there. Our company really looks to break the old paradigm in a similar way related to how large brands and retailers would go to market to serve their consumers. And at the time, each one of those retailers were struggling with the technical infrastructure and innovation that would help drive their business and less on the engagement with their consumers. So we basically set about to try to change that. Had a lot of people that came from interesting domains of experience from the data center world and from the retail world, and kind of bringing that mix together was pretty exciting, had made for great discussions. But essentially what we created was our own cloud, and we called it grid computing in the day, but now cloud. We leveraged that across 13 different data centers in all the major regions of the world to support about 150 customers and about a little over 600 commerce transacting websites. And we serve a lot of the brands that you might know, such as Adidas and Barney's of New York, Jones Apparel, Land's End, and so on. And we continue to grow those types of businesses where they're looking to do that with the engagement. So technology's been an important part of that, but as Michael mentioned, also this shared success model has really been a core differentiator for us, where we're really aligned with our customers, our clients, as true partners in their success and their growth, and we're certainly doing well, I think, together. But it's been quite a journey.
So we'll come back and ask you whether, just so you're prepared for it, how you would have started differently at Amazon and been around.
Great. My name is Bryan House. I'm Vice President of Product Marketing at Acquia. We're a commercial open source company, and we've built a cloud that enables people to use the Drupal open source CMS platform. And so our business is really about what Michael talked about with minimum viable differentiation. A lot of our customers are in the entertainment marketing business. They're in the television business. They're in the public sector. They provide government services. They don't want to manage complex infrastructure. They don't want to be responsible for scaling complex web applications and all the moving parts. And so we've built a tremendous business providing that infrastructure, providing support around that, and helping run some of the largest websites in the world. We, for instance, powered the Grammys on Grammy Sunday. So if any of you watched that show, all they did was say, go to Grammy.com, Grammy.com, Grammy.com. Well, they got 460 million hits that night. That all ran in our cloud. There was no reports of outages, unlike Coca-Cola at the Super Bowl when they paid millions of dollars for their campaign. And guess what? All the tweets were about how their website was down. That's the problem we solve for our customers.
Raj Aggarwal, Localytics. We're an analytics and marketing platform for mobile apps. So we help the developers and publishers of iOS, Android, and other smartphone and tablet apps gain deep understanding about who their users are, and then take that insight and leverage it to interact with users in a targeted way, customize content, and personalize the end user's journey through the app. We are about 4.5 years old, and it's funny, we actually, while we were starting, we went to one of those, the roadshow AWS events, and Prasad right there was actually on one of those panels. And that's where we first started to get familiar with AWS, and as we started to launch the business, it was kind of a no-brainer for us in that time, late, sort of early 2009, where the momentum was shifting towards doing things in the cloud. We didn't know what our growth trajectory was going to be, and so we really valued that elasticity and the flexibility. And it was a good thing we did, because we've grown really quickly in terms of data volume. We collect data now from 750 million unique devices, collecting a few billion data points a day. And we would not have and our back-end engineering team is still 3 people. We would not have been able to get anywhere near where we were as quickly without being on AWS. And we also were part of AWS's Startup Challenge about 2 or 3 years ago, where we came in 2nd place. And so AWS has been good to us as well.
So while each of you think about what question you'd like to ask Andy, because I'd like you to sort of take that as an open opportunity, I want to come back to the one person here who didn't have the option to Cloud Hatch, which is you, Wayne. So now you've heard Andy's pitch. Let's rewind 10 years back and say, imagine you're having the conversation with Andy and you could start again today. What would you ask him, and what would convince you to get on board?
Yeah, I think that for folks that are involved in any new idea, you really need to understand what that core belief is, what really is the different value you would provide to the market. And it's a tough time, as many of you have experienced when you go through that. There's as many people that don't believe in what you're proclaiming as those that would align. And I think if you can get that reaction from folks, you're doing something, so you should tune into that. So going through the experience of Demandware and kind of replaying it in this scenario, we would look towards how we could innovate and bring that same value proposition to the market that we envisioned at that time, and we would leverage any assets that were available or partners that were available to be able to do that. So there'd be no question that we would go deep into that in the beginning. Certainly the course that we had to choose in doing it ourselves allows us to really empathize and resonate with the value proposition that's created, certainly at a smaller scale for us than with AWS. But those value props, the disciplines that it brings are all healthy for the company, and it allows you to focus on what's really important. So the question, though, that I would turn around, and certainly any young company that was contemplating this and thinking very big into the future may wonder about why, I believe in the technology that's offered and the services, and I can see how I can scale. But what about that strategic dependency that I build on you as a partner, and what control or sense of control can I feel like I have on that? And secondarily, how do you communicate the value proposition to the market of your customers if they look through you and see Amazon behind you and wonder, well, what are you really doing? So for new young companies that are contemplating this, what about the strategic dependency that they build on you, and how do they continue to clearly articulate their value?
Those are good questions. And what we tell customers when we have those types of conversations is that, again, all of this is a trade-off that you decide as a company. And if you decide that the value is high enough that you don't want to be managing your own infrastructure, you want to be able to spend your resource on differentiating what your product and your business is, then you're going to work with a partner. And then you want to pick a partner who you actually believe is going to be the right long-term partner for you. And I tried to articulate in the presentation I did about what I think is important, but I think the types of dependency questions you ask is you have to assess whether you think whoever you use is going to be secure, and whether they're going to perform operationally the way you need to, and whether they're going to listen to what you tell them matters, and that you want them to build and that they can move quickly, or whether you just feel like they're talking but there is no substance behind it. I think that it also matters if you believe that if your cost structure matters. I think that you have to first decide whether the cost of the platform makes sense, but you also should do some research around, will it scale well as I grow? And really understand the different pricing and costing mechanisms that are available to you, because something like AWS, a lot of times people they'll look on the website, they'll see the on-demand price, and they won't realize that there are other constructs like reserved instances which allow you to effectively pay a small amount up front and then get much lower hourly costs that save you a lot of money. Or even we have a spot market that allows all of our excess capacity that's not being used, we make available in a spot market where you can bid how much you're willing to pay for that resource, and then if you're over the market clearing price, you get to use it until you're not over the market clearing. But all those things are sometimes not well understood, and companies don't research it, but they actually present really interesting differing capabilities depending on what your workload characteristics are. So I think those are some of the things that you'll want to care about as you think about partnering with somebody strategically, where you're going to depend on them.
You raised an important second point, which I don't want to miss the opportunity to get you to talk a little bit about, which is, of course, a lot of startup companies use this as part of their value proposition. But I think Wayne was getting at, so what happens if they look through that and they say, well, it's just Amazon behind it, so you're really not differentiating that much. How do you help the company address that issue? I mean, I'm seeing a couple of nodding heads here. So,
well, I want to make sure I understand the question. Is the thinking that well, it's just Amazon doing the infrastructure, so you're not differentiating on the infrastructure? Or because I would think that we maintain, and we've seen this for almost all the companies we can imagine, that the infrastructure isn't differentiating. So if you've built a business where the real differentiation, your value proposition differentiation is the infrastructure, that's a real problem.
Absolutely.
For the vast majority, it still might be the right answer, by the way, but it's a much bigger problem. We don't have that issue with the vast majority of our customers because the infrastructure isn't the differentiation. So in a lot of cases, it's useful and credibility building to be able to say Amazon's behind it because we have a track record.
I mean, I might challenge us to sort of in the Harvard sense think about this again like any business problem, which is that obviously, if you just take something and you don't add value to it and you pass it on, well, you can't expect to be rewarded for that. Maybe you're a channel, and maybe you're creating reach, and that may be one part of being a reseller or a value-added reseller. But I think for companies that are trying to create innovation, you better have some fundamental differentiated innovation back to our value proposition. Is it defensible? Is it disruptive? And so forth. So I need to go through all of that, and I think that's what you're getting at, really. Sorry, Bryan, go ahead. You had a question.
Yeah, I think we see this clearly because we're an open source platform, so the vast majority of our developers and users are DIY, right? So before we entered this market and some of our competitors entered the market, they would go to Amazon directly, or they would go to Rackspace directly, or name your hosting provider, and they would get paid. Their consultants, they would get paid to build that infrastructure. So I think there is sometimes we wonder, there is a question because the points you're making about cost are fantastic, right? We benefit from that, our customers benefit from that, but it puts cost right on the table in every conversation. So it's not that they can't see the clear value add that we provide. It's more that we get that, but I could get paid to build all that too, and it may not be as good. But do I need the Cadillac? I can build the Hyundai, whatever.
Yeah, I think it's a good point, and I'm sure that exists, and I'm sure it'll exist forever. At the end of the day, it's kind of what Michael was just saying too. I happen to think, and I know both of you think this too, that Acquia has built a lot of value on top of AWS, and that it's not the same thing as people doing it themselves. But there's always going to be that option, and there always has been that option, which is, for people that want to take the time and spend the money and the people and the resource to build it themselves, and they don't see the value of a product that's actually abstracted away a lot of that heavy lifting, then they'll go after doing it themselves. But people who've built good differentiated products on top that make the world much easier for folks, you'll get people to appreciate that.
It also leads to sort of this question that I have is sort of, how do you guys think about partnering, right? Because, their opportunity is we build our businesses together to build partnerships, and how do we eliminate some of the unnecessary competition, if you will, or co-opetition, that in a way that grows both of our businesses. So I don't know, philosophically.
Yeah, well, and I think you and I have had this conversation a little bit too, so it's an oldie but goodie. But it's incredibly important for us in our ecosystem for our partners to do well. Much in the same way Wayne was talking about it, our business model is that we don't grow if our customers and our partners don't grow. So we're the biggest cheerleaders for our customers. And I think then the question becomes, what are some of the ways we can help people who've built businesses on top of us to get more awareness and more adoption? And some of that, we've been working hard on that for the last year or two, but I would say that we're also not done, continuing to add capabilities there. But one of the things we did was our marketplace, and so that was we had a lot of feedback from our ISV partners that they wanted to have a way to reach more of our customers. We have a lot of customers who are coming to our website, and so the fact that the marketplace is growing quickly is something that I think ISVs are finding useful. We have a sales team. It's growing. We're, as I mentioned earlier, we're trying to grow thoughtfully about it. But where we have customers that we believe have an interest in a product that our partners provide, we try to plug those opportunities into those partners. I think that we can continue to be more organized about that and build more programs around how to do that. And I think that's one of the things that we're working through. But that's a second way. We do press, joint press and referrals with a lot of our partners. So we're very committed to. We're open to ideas as well. That is something I think that companies who've built platforms continue to work on forever, and we will too.
And I think, again, to bring this into the Harvard construct of what we should learn from this as startup secrets, you're hearing this conversation live, and we've talked about it many times in the classroom, which is you should expect, if you're going to go and build a strategic partnership, to figure out what it is that you're bringing as a win-win proposition. Large companies, just like you, have priorities, believe me. They may seem to have infinite resources, but they don't. I mean, I'm sure you're challenged every day to figure out where you put time. So you have to expect to come and say, look, if we are able to bring you, for example, new reach to new applications, to new marketplaces, then how could that be beneficial to you and how would that work? These things don't happen by accident. There has to be that win-win construct. So I think you had a real-time dialogue in an example of that.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Let's talk a little bit about ZYNC, if we could, Bryan, for a moment. You obviously had a business which I know a little bit about the background. I don't think you could have started your business without the cloud. Is that fair? I mean, you had some pretty fundamental disruptions there.
The idea of being able to render as many images as we need to with the level of iterations that we need to for feature film work that we're we're doing.
Could you give an example of that? Because it'll bring it to life.
Yeah.
I know we've talked about some.
Well, we've worked on films like Here Comes the Boom, and some of our users are working on Robert Zemeckis' Flight. They pushed all of that film through ZYNC. But for the example for Zero, we had some really big peaks with these projects that are 2 or 3 months long that we certainly could have done it. We just couldn't have done it as well, and that's never why you want to go into businesses, to go halfway through. So we said let's get onto Amazon, see how that goes, and prove that out. And because as far as we had known, nobody had ever rendered any images for a feature film on the cloud before us. So that was a fantastic success for us and allowed our company to really grow, be able to move within a year. We weren't fixed to a data center that kept us in a certain place. We were able to move the company and really have a lot of flexibility with the way that we operated. So ZYNC is, we're consistently seeing users using about 3,000 hours on a certain day. They're calling 48,000 cores in a day, and that's just one user, and we have 1,900 pre-registrants. So we're finding that there's a lot of we're seeing a lot of interest, and it is certainly worldwide, and that's why Amazon was a great partner for us. Is because we can easily go to these regions that are in these developing markets, really doing a lot of great work.
So what if, I mean, it's a fantastic story and it's a wonderful example, and it sort of plays to all the strengths of Amazon with its elasticity and so forth, and distributed, even the distributed nature of it. But what are some of the questions you might have for Andy about how you evolve your business?
I guess from a customer standpoint, where do you see Amazon in establishing? Sorry, I'll back up. When we're evaluating which cloud partner to go with, obviously cost versus compute speed, and what sort of compute resources are available to us is obviously a big decision, because we're paying on an hourly basis. It's tough to judge that sometimes when you're looking at different. It's not a commodity at the end of the day. Do you see Amazon taking a lead in establishing some sort of commodification basis for a compute unit? I know you have the ECU unit, but do you see anything across the overall landscape that Amazon's thinking about taking a lead on and actually have a fixed unit of what a compute cycle is?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I don't know if there will ever be one standard that works across all the potential providers. It's when we started, there really wasn't anybody else doing it, so we tried to give some kind of unit that we thought you could benchmark around and try to understand what different instance types or families would provide. Yeah. And so I think some of the providers who are entering the market are effectively using the same thing and just calling it something different, and others are picking different units. So I don't know the answer whether we will. I would say that to date, although I'm really interested in both whether it's now or offline and understanding more of the details, we haven't had that be a pervasive question from customers. More of what we've gotten is, well, it's great that you have a standard instance family with a certain amount of memory and compute, but can you have compute heavy instance families, and can you have memory instance families, and can you have storage heavy families, and can you have GPU? We get a lot of those, because people, they want their workloads to work on instance families that are.
For the scripts that we run, I mean, this is getting a little detailed, but for the scripts that we run, there's a sweet spot that is really great to have, so that we should talk about that.
Yeah. And interestingly enough, by the way, you're describing what is a very typical product lifecycle, just so to sort of generalize this, which is, you start with something that's very, very specific, and as Andy said, you've got to innovate fast on it. But then you get all these requirements that fill out the whole product, and you talked about things like certification, many things that frankly you never think about as an entrepreneur. And then there's another phase that comes beyond that, which is to start to get to address very specific market needs. And each use case then defines a basis for perhaps considering a branch of a product, or a differentiation in your product line, or a whole new product line. And so I'm sure Amazon will go through that in its life cycle here. It'll be fun to have you back here in 10 years' time. Yeah. Actually, maybe not in my case. Too much gray hair.
Me too. Hope I have hair.
Raj, we haven't given you a chance to talk, but obviously Localytics is a business that's, it's built scale, and yet you're still a startup. What did you do differently as a result of the cloud? Perhaps you could talk to us a little bit about how you've thought about either your product or your business model or go-to-markets. What are some of the things you've done as a cloud hatch startup?
So I mean, one of the things is that analytics companies for a long time, because they had to sort of build out data centers and manage to a certain amount of data, kind of locked you into contracts and said, you're going to have this many data points, and if you go over that, there's going to be these severe overage fees, and and it was a pretty inflexible model. We were able to kind of turn that on its head and really compete against some of the larger companies that were trying to come into the mobile space from the web with that kind of a model, and say, look, it's all flexible. We know December or wherever you're going to have spikiness, and during those months, your price will go up. But we're not going to sort of lock you then into that rate and sort of make you commit well ahead of time. And so it's allowed for a much more flexible business model. We've been able to do things like, typically in the analytics world, people charge on like server calls or data points, like a sort of this obscure number that's relevant to a provider's cost. Whereas we take on the risk and we say, we're going to charge you on the number of users that you have. And there'll be more data points on some, less data points on another, but that's something that you as a customer understand, and that's how your pricing will move. And that's been in addition to the product side of things, our pricing model, we've used that as a competitive differentiator successfully.
So let's take a step back for a second and give you a chance, Andy, to sort of talk to this group at large as well as our panel here. What would you recommend that startups think differently about as they start in the cloud, as they hatch in the cloud?
Well, I think there are a few things, and many of the people on this panel probably know this already, but first thing is you want to build your application horizontally as opposed to vertically. I think some of the companies who have existing footprints that have trouble moving to the cloud are because they've built these very vertically oriented apps, and before they see the benefits of the cloud, but they have to actually rewrite their applications to handle it.
You're talking about from an architecture standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, it's they've got single points of failure that are scary for them, and so one is, if you're going to build on top of the cloud, you just need to think through how to build horizontally. I think you want to build in a way that's fault tolerant. If there's some companies where, especially early on, that maybe performance isn't as important to them, but any business that gets any traction, performance matters a lot, and so you're going to want to build in multiple data centers or availability zones. I think that's really important. I would try and test a lot. It's so inexpensive to test using the cloud. I mean, you pay by the hour. It sounds like Bryan probably has done this. You can test all kinds of different instance types, instance families, sizes, et cetera, and figure out what actually is the right resource for you to use. And then I think that one of the nice things too about the cloud is because you only pay for what you use, it allows you to iterate quickly, and not just in your development cycle, but also test ideas with consumer sets more quickly. And I probably don't have to tell you this, that it's really interesting how much further along startups are when they go raise that first round, because they've been able to build something without having to lay out all that capital where they had to raise money, and they have traction, they've learned, and they've sometimes pivoted. And it's one of the nice things. We hear this all the time from various startups who started with a certain idea and they actually tested, and it didn't, they weren't spending very much and it wasn't really working, and they tried these two things and they repositioned themselves and pivoted, and you get to do a lot of that experimentation early on if you don't build out too much too early.
That's a great set of points there, and I'd like to just ask any of you if you wanted to chime in. What are some of the things you'd add from your own experience from doing this sort of from the ground up as a customer of Amazon's?
I'd say just if you're going to build software on Amazon, just push it out and find that alpha user, that trusted partner that you can trust to test it out, and really just get the software out there. Don't worry too much about how the software is performing. If you get it to a certain level, just get it out there and start really seeing how it works. Getting that feedback, that intimate feedback from a trusted partner, that is super important, and you can't worry about the details to a certain extent. Just get it going.
So I know Wayne gave an example of this. In his experience, there was an opportunity to not just innovate and test around the product, but also around the business model. So maybe you could say something about how you think, from the cloud standpoint, there's an opportunity there.
Well, I think the cloud, in general, it's a whole different philosophy of how you partner and build and engage with your customers and your other providers that I think transcends the technology of cloud, and it's really the spirit of cloud and kind of this whole hatching notion. And so one of the things, certainly, and we're a customer as well of AWS for a number of services that surround our core, and what we've found is essentially being able to try very quickly a lot of alternatives and expose those to our first customers of that particular new service or new product has been really beneficial. So being able to turn that around quickly, get the feedback in a real world experience, allow, which I think is common to many of our models, allow our partners and our customers to innovate on top of what we provide. So exposing those via interfaces, and we can do that when we're carrying through kind of the cloud model. It really gives you leverage on what can be done and not just be captive inside the team. So.
That's a fantastic point, which we should all just step back from too, which is I think we tend to think about innovation sometimes as just primary innovation around us, but in fact this notion of secondary innovation with our customers is very important. And there's a second thing that you're also highlighting, which is very few startups can afford to build a true whole product, an end-to-end solution, if you will. And yet, with the cloud, the ability to connect a whole bunch of different cloud services together as what in effect gets delivered as a whole product is very real. And you can both therefore innovate, to your first point, and complete a solution in a way that just wasn't possible before. So it's a great point of that. Thanks. So Bryan, I know one of the things that you have to do. We have how many partners now at Acquia? I lose track these days.
Over 600.
So 600 partners now. How do we enable our partners, with the cloud, and what are we doing differently to use that as a channel?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that the cloud enables us to do is to get the products in the hands of our channel and our ecosystem a lot faster. So in one way, it's our partners, and so we have free versions of all of our products, and we have enablement programs, and we've built a channel marketing and sales staff to go out there to get them utilizing our product and incentivize them and build, economic models as well as sort of technical training models to get them to utilize these products, give us feedback and provide input into the organization, make it work for them, but also start to tangibly feel the value. I mean, I came from the enterprise proprietary software space. You'd spend 24 months testing, selling the product, and then they never get to touch it. Maybe they do a POC and then they get there and be like, oh my gosh, that just doesn't work anymore. And so we do that for ecosystem as well as for us in our business. I mentioned before, our customers are very DIY. Sometimes the biggest influencers are the developers themselves. And so, how do we the cloud enables us to get our product in their hands so they build that trust relationship so they go advocate inside their organizations for us.
It's a great example. Well, Raj, I talked about one other piece that I think is incredibly important, which is this is really, I called it a weather system to keep the sort of connotation, but Andy referred it to as an ecosystem. This is an emerging ecosystem. You're contributing a whole bunch of different capabilities. Are you opening any of that up as APIs, and are you yourself thinking about how you might expose your capabilities as a service for others to use?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, because mobile is an important touch point, a growing touch point, but it's still just one touch point with the customer, and it's important for companies to get a holistic view of who their user is, connect that to web data, to offline data, bring it into their own system. So we're exposing, we're collecting and maintaining very granular data, and then we're exposing that through an API back to our customers. And many of them, like for example, Wall Street Journal is using that to pull data from our system, combine it with web analytics and offline data, and then understand, well, when somebody is using mobile, how does that impact their readership on the web? If somebody's a subscriber, how does that change their reading habits? What content is most interesting to them? And again, getting that more holistic view of the customer to better improve their product.
Mm-hmm. It's a great example. Well, I'm well aware that the only thing that we're holding you back from right now is lunch. But I want to just take a moment to say a warm thank you to all of the startups who've joined Andy and I here. And of course, a very big thank you to Andy himself for opening up this whole dialogue, being so gracious as to spend the the day with us here, and he's going to be around for lunch, so I encourage you to come and meet him. So with that, thank you all very much for being so patient and sticking with us. Thanks very much.